Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back to watch this. This is the last installment of One Story Town. Between me and Doug Leslie, Doug will be doing most of the narration for this. So, without further ado, let's watch the rest of this exciting ending. And I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Now reach the fourth and final installment of the description of the playing of the scenario One Story Town uh, between Mark and myself. Uh, we are now at Russian turn 5. Now, assuming you've been following the action so far, you will be aware that the Finns started off heading towards the 2 victory point building down at F4. They sent a platoon of tanks led by their flamethrower tank towards that building, managed to burn up a squad and medium machine gun who were defending that building. But then in turn, they succumbed to a counterattack by Russian tanks that came on in turn 3 and managed to get a critical hit on the flamethrower tank, which was, excuse me, a pretty critical moment in the game. I'll return to that because it did raise some interesting play issues. But by the start of Russian turn 5, the Finns have abandoned any attempt to capture the 2 victory point building. All their forces have swung towards the centre, and the key now is whether in their remaining 2 turns they can capture the 2 buildings still held by the Russians, which are at 49p6 and 22p8. So we look at the position at the start of board 5. My reinforcements are ready to come on at Y1 on board 22. I've got all sorts of options for where the reinforcements come on. I chose that location because I felt that from there they could both threaten the W8 building, but they could also swing to the right and help to reinforce the defence of the building at P8. And there's a very useful hex in U4 which covers the approach to the bridge in R7. So I decided that that was what I was going to do, that the tanks were going to head for the wall at Q2 and P2, from where they would threaten the Finnish AFV, which currently has acquired the location at P9 and is no doubt planning to get some smoke in there during the next Finnish prep fire phase. So let's see how it went. We start off with rally phase. The Finns managed to recover a light machine gun in 22I9, but they were less fortunate when they attempted to rally a broken squad in U6, and it suffered a casualty morale check result and became a broken half squad instead. So that was kind of the way it was rolling for Mark at this point. So prep fire, wasn't a lot of prep fire to do here, but the key one for me was firing my squad and light machine gun that was in X5 at the anti-tank rifle position in U6. The reason for that was that I knew that my tanks were going to be moving through T2 and S2 on their way to the wall, and the anti-tank rifle was clearly going to threaten um, that approach. So I hoped to get lucky with my prep fire, and I proceeded to roll a 5, not for the first time in this scenario, but there's a lot of 5s emanating from the Russian direction. That was enough to generate a morale check, and the 8 morale level Finnish Superman half squad wasn't able to stand up to that and promptly broke. So that was a pretty good start for the Russians. Onto the movement phase, and the onboard Russian armour moved through the clump of buildings surrounding J5 using bypass and came to a halt with the lead tank in K3, sorry, K7, K8. And there was some discussion about where the turret could end up pointing if it took a shot in an inbounding fire. We eventually decided that it could move its TCA having shot. And once we established that, I announced that I was going to fire my coaxial machine gun at the adjacent squad in K9. Now, at this point, Mark, as you will have seen, you've been following this, was feeling a bit victimized by the dice. And he then said, "Okay, Doug, roll your double one, and you'll never guess what happened next." Yep, I duly proceeded to roll a double one. There was much gnashing of teeth from the direction of Eastbourne, and that broke the Finnish squad. And yeah, that was another fortuitous die roll for the Russians. Not the first time and not the last time in this scenario. So if we move on, the bit of discussion about various things here. Yep. So having broken that squad, the Finns, the Finnish squad 99, felt that it needed to hold its fire to deter the Russian 9-2 leader, squadron medium machine gun that were currently in K6 from moving closer to the Victory building in P8, which meant that I was able to move some squads from the 2VP building across the road to the central clump of buildings around J6, from where they'd be able to put some pressure on the Finns if they tried to cross the open ground towards that building. So we then go over to the other side of the board. The reinforcements come on. A few optimistic line of sight checks by Mark, but I was able to get the Commissar, 3 squads, 2 light machine guns up to V3, destination U4, and they were going to cover the approach to the bridge. And my tanks come on, CE at this point. They sail through T2 and S2, which are now unguarded by the anti-tank rifle, and they stop adjacent to the wall. Mark wisely declines to shoot at them. He's got his mind set on getting some smoke down, so he decides just to take his chances and hope that I don't manage to nail his tank in advance fire, which was not a safe assumption the way this game had gone so far, but still, correct decision, I think. Up in the top building on board 49, I managed to get the squad with light machine gun out of the encircled location. It survived defensive fire. Other squads skulked into the lumber yard. Down at P8 building, everybody skulked back to P8. Intention was to move a concealed squad back into P9 and reduce the chances of smoke landing there to some extent. So we then have some ineffective defensive fire. Just rush through that and Mark duly managed to get his tank to acquire P9 preparatory to getting the smoke off in the prep fire phase. So my Russian tanks then acquired his tank. Didn't get a critical hit this time, but don't worry, there was one coming. So I just get a couple of broken units falling back. Russian units advance into positions where they can threaten the building down in X7. And everybody moves into position to try to cover the approach to the P8 building.
So here at this point, we're having a big discussion about
So on to the finish, turn
realism in ASL.
6. Manages to rally a squad up in 49 T6. And then the big moment. It's time to get the smoke into P9. So, modifiers we have got. He's got acquisition, that's 2. He's firing smoke, that's another 2, so that's 4. That's going to come off his die roll. He then has to add 2 for firing a concealed unit, and he's buttoned up. So it's overall -1. So if he can roll an 8 or less, he will get the smoke down. Drum roll, big moment, tank fires and breaks its main armament with yet another 12, which was pretty typical the way things went for Mark in this game, I'd have to say. So, um, yep, that
So at
was
this
the
point, I
end
decide
of
to
that.
rush the buildings
So no
because I
smoke.
knew
Finns are
it
going to
was
have to do
over.
this the hard way. So they started off up on board 49. Guys charged the building, managed to break an 838 with a demo charge at the second attempt. But 2 other Finnish squads were able to get into position. Surviving the final protective fire. I don't think I've ever used as much protective fire as I did in this game. None of it ever worked, but at least this time they didn't break. I guess that was progress. Down at the key building, down at P8, Finns moved towards it from the um, top part of the board.
I ran at it.
Survived defensive fire, so he ends up with 2 squads in position to advance into O9 and P9. Um, Now, I had originally intended that my medium machine gun 2 squads and 9-2 leader would be firing at the Weeds Hex in O10. And for some reason which I cannot explain, I came to the view that I didn't actually have a line of sight there, and I thought that I wasn't going to be able to fire at them. I suspect that Mark maybe didn't realise that that was my understanding, because I think he possibly sent a leader and squad into the firing line of those units to stop me doing that. Well, whatever. He moves a hero in to join the squad that's already in O10. But the units that try and move across the open ground towards O9 all got broken.
Yeah, I started taking units off at this point because I knew the game was ending here. I was just seeing, wow, could I gang rush something and actually succeed?
Other side of the stream, there's an attempt made to get to the bridge, which is also unsuccessful. There's just no way it was getting across all that open ground.
So again, wiped me out here, and I just took them off the board. Rather unsportsmanlike, I would say, but it was just trying to speed things up because I knew the end
You'll
was
see that
coming.
some units were getting removed from the board, even though they weren't actually KIA'd. If they broke and they weren't going to get to the victory building, Mark was just putting them off the board because they were no longer
Out of sheer
relevant to
frustration.
what was going to happen next. So we just move forward. There's various units trying to get into position um, and not managing.
Got valiant tries, though.
And then defensive fire. Uh, the final insult to Mark was when one of my tanks from the wall fired at his tank,
Look at that.
and yet another critical hit, yet another burning wreck, and that ensured that the tank would, the finished tank was not going to be able to use any sort of sleazy vehicle bypass movements
Two
tricks
critical
on the
hits on
next
both
turn
my
to
tanks.
freeze the defensive fire.
He was just
So
gunning
that
me down
was
left and right.
pretty much the final nail in the coffin as far as Mark was concerned.
Hmm.
Um, so we move on to the advancing fire phase. Up on board 49, Finns managed to pin the machine gun squad in O7. Then the advanced phase, everybody piles in. There's 4 different close combats taking place. We start off at the top building in the O6, and it's hand-to-hand combat time, and the Finns are successful in killing both of the Russian squads there, so they do manage to take control of that building. However, down at P8 doesn't go quite as well because the Russian squad in P9 survives hand-to-hand combat and manages to kill the Finnish attacker. The Finns are able to win the close combat in O9. But at this point, Mark concedes because he's left basically, he's still got 2 squads, one of which is armed with a heavy machine gun accompanied by an 8-1 leader. He's got those 2 squads that he would have to get out of the building.
Hmm.
He's about to get hit by 20 firepower um, +1 in the Russian prep fire phase. And then there's another squad that can add another 8 firepower attack from P9, and there's numerous Russian units that can move towards that victory building,
Hmm.
and it's just really
Too many
pretty
tanks
impossible, I
coming
think,
up.
at this point for
Not enough
that
left.
squadron hero to survive in O9 and clear out the 2 remaining Russians. So Mark conceded at this point.
Mm.
So, yeah, this was a really fun scenario. There's a huge amount of um, different things that both players can try here. There's lots of variability about where the Russians bring on their reinforcements. I don't know if the place I brought them on were best. Worked out in this occasion, but on another day I might have wished that I'd brought them on somewhere else. Can't really fault Mark's strategy at all. I do think that the 2 victory point building down at F4 is a big ask. It's very hard for the Finns to capture that. They do, however, have to at least threaten it in order to tie down Russians so that they're not going to rush across and try to reinforce the defences at O9. And essentially, that's what Mark did. But the key point of the game, and I'll just have a very quick discussion of it because I think it is quite instructive. The key point was when Mark um, put his flamethrower tank into E7, and managed to burn out a medium machine gun squad that was located in F6. So that was fine. But the problem was then that it was a very exposed position if the Russian reinforcements came on at Y1, which was what Mark anticipated they were going to do, and indeed was what they actually did. Because the problem was that the flamethrower tank had absolutely no way of defending itself against tanks that were behind the hedge line down at the F1 area. The other Finnish tank is really the escort for the flamethrower tank. And because it's stuck away behind that D6 building, it can't really do anything to protect this unit. And I say it is a very key unit in this scenario.
I don't disagree with Doug's reasoning here. If we go back, these two tanks that were now up here had been down here threatening my tanks. And it is true that the escort tank, which eventually made it up here, was behind this building and could not threaten these tanks. However, in spite of what Doug says here, and again, he's making good points, my idea was that these two tanks would separate out at this point, go for the task checks to make them viable um, as as a unit. They're okay, but it's all well and good to say that that's an escort tank, but the thing is, no matter what, the flamethrower tank has to be in the front. And at the time that these guys came around all the way here, this tank was still alive, so I needed to avoid getting shot at by this. It was an armored car. So that. So anyway, at this point, I had to take that risk and hope that this guy could then break off. If he could go into motion, he'd be able to change his covered arc and head out that way. Any tanks sitting here would not have any shots at it. That was my defense uh, that I proposed to myself. So that's my statement to Doug. Let's let Doug continue here.
So what happens here is that when the Russians come on and stop in F1, uh, the Finns have a real problem because platoon movement is a pain in the neck if you're trying to conduct a mobile tank battle. The reason for that is that you can't just go into motion as easily as a tank can if it has a radio. There is a +1 modifier for every tank in the platoon. So the choice for the Finns was either try to get the whole platoon into motion, which means that it would be a +2 modifier. They were never going to have more than 4 movement points in line of sight of a Russian tank. So to get the whole platoon into motion was going to need a 2 or less, obviously against the odds. So the alternative would be to try to get the lead tank into motion, but it's still going to need a 3 or less to do that. And even if it succeeds, it's then not going to be using platoon movement in the next turn, so both Finnish tanks might not be able to move at all if they fail their morale checks. And it's just a very awkward situation for them to be in. So there's every chance that they will not be in motion. And so, although the critical hit was obviously a very lucky roll for the Russians, at the end of the day, there's no difference in practical terms between a critical hit and a six.
Well, I have to disagree with that. A critical hit's going to have a double to kill number. The double kill number is going to flame out my flamethrowing tank with a 20 to kill versus a chance of my frontal armor deflecting a 10 to kill. 10 minus 3 is a 7. It's not as if that's a guaranteed kill. So here I disagree with Doug. It's not as likely a prospect as he thinks it is. Not in my opinion, anyway. Of course, that is relying a little bit more on luck than perhaps I should. But as the Finns, what are you supposed to do in this? You need to be quite aggressive. So that's my argument about that. Start this again.
Both kill the target. And sure, that is against the odds. However, the Russians will be getting two bites at the cherry because the first attack misses. The platoon then starts up again, moves one hex forward, stops. Then the second tank will acquire the flamethrower tank in the advancing fire phase. And that means that if that tank is not in motion, there's every chance it's going to be destroyed in the next turn. Nothing's certain, but it was just a very key moment in the game, and with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps there was a might have been a better approach for the Finns to take.
I'm not sure what that would be, but I suppose not even go at the big 2-point victory building, but simply head towards the central building. But then he would know that I'm no longer threatening the 2-point victory building by sending the flamethrowing tank down there. It definitely immobilized his troops from stopping me from doing that. That's my thinking anyway. All right, let's let Doug finish this off.
Which would not expose them to fire from that direction. But it's very easy to be wise after the event, and but that was a turning point. And as I think I commented the last time, uh, that flamethrower is so important for the Finns. You know, that's what gives them their cutting edge. And when that went, it was always going to be a struggle for the Finns to win from then on, and so it proved. Anyway, great scenario. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Sorry about all the dice, Mark. I certainly had the rubber green on this one, but no doubt it'll be different next time.
Hopefully it will be, Doug. Thank you. So, anyway, I thank everybody for watching up to this point. If you liked it, thanks for watching all the way to this point. And please like and subscribe. If you didn't like it, thanks for watching all the way to this point as well. All right. It's always a pleasure. Again, it's Mark Hanna, Grecian Formula. Remember, unscripted, unapologetic, uncensored, and psychologically immune to social media scoring. Take care. I'll see you next time.